just get the Jordan.
Peter, don't worry about admitting folks. I'll do that.
Okay. All right. So we're starting the monthly ZDD meeting at 5:04. Welcome everybody, and I hope a few more show up. I suggest that we pursue an agenda like this. I'd like to start tonight by making talking a little bit about the ZDD and its future. Then I think we should get a report from Lisa about the most recent conversations with DEMPED, and then turn to a discussion of DEMPED. I'd like to include in that discussion, but I'll follow the lead of the committee, where we are on the deed restriction recommendation we made and the ANC agreed to. And then turn to the issue of OP's presentation Monday, and maybe build that, assuming that Peter Lynch comes, build that discussion around the proposal he sent around. So let me just start with just a few remarks about the ZDD. In recent weeks, we've seen some issues that we did early footwork on removed to a panel of ANC commissioners that includes me. There's been some criticism by some committee members of other committee members, and even suggestions that some members be removed from the committee. There's even been a suggestion we throw in the towel and disband. There's no doubt about it that the issues that we're trying to handle are tough. Managing relations with the city is tough. There are a lot of strongly held views among committee members and big disagreements. Notwithstanding all of this, I don't think that any honest voice should be silenced. And I do think that the committee should hang together. This is going to be a long process. There are going to be a lot of chapters. The ANC is going to need to take fast soundings of the community for months and maybe longer. And for better or for worse, this group basically represents the span of opinion in the community. So it's a good sounding board for the ANC. And I think it can continue to serve a useful function, notwithstanding all of the problems we've had. Hopefully the tech ones will go away. And I guess finally, besides that, if we can't keep talking to each other, I'm not sure what it means about the community talking to itself and to the city. Anyways, that's my case for keeping this effort alive. I'd be happy to hear from others, although we do have a lot of business to do. So does anybody else have any comments on just the issue of the functioning of the committee and the usefulness of the committee?
Jordan, Jim
I just wanted to say I agree with everything Peter just said.
Thanks. Okay. So should we turn to the, if others don't have comments, let's turn to the issue of what the most recent information from DEMPED.
let me comment on that, Peter. The only thing I'm gonna say, because I, as chair, have heard from quite a few people, and I agree with what you said, but I also think we need to make sure that we understand that the discussion should remain civil between all parties, and sometimes it's not. I think the committee is going to be most useful when it's making actionable recommendations to the ANC. And I do think the committee should have a broader discussion. And I know not a lot of folks are speaking up right now, but I've heard what you said. And I've just observed some things that, I think the committee needs to decide where it wants to spend its time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff floating around, and I know there's a lot of talk, which is great. But I would just hope that the committee strongly sticks with its mission and get to the ANC the actionable items and the discussion that we need from people of diverse opinions, which you all are. And sometimes the conversations go off the rail a little bit.
Well, I understand what you're saying. Others?
I would chime in here a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I've been having trouble with these iPods. Peter, I agree with everything you say. Here's my response. I want to do something. Okay. I would love for this committee to develop some tasks so that we could do something and have some products. You know, we're supposed to be a group with a certain level of expertise, and if not expertise, and interest in these issues, and we should be able to help inform the ANC. And I would love for us to think about our scope of work, our tasks moving forward, so that we can take advantage of who we are.
Good, thanks. Others? Well, let me just say, and we can end this part of the meeting. We actually have done quite a bit in the 6 months. I agree that we were most productive maybe through March, and we've been less productive since. I think that the work that came out of this committee, but that was done by Jim Feldman on the deed restriction and on deed restrictions along Connecticut Avenue, was stellar. I think that the committee served as a useful sounding board early on the surplusing resolution. I think you'll notice that the resolutions as late as May that the ANC passed were based on recommendations of this committee. I think in that regard, we've done stuff, and I hope we do more. I think there is a feeling that I think behind Ron's statement, and Ron, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to get on to essentially a decision about zoning and a decision about the community center library. And we need to bring as much of the community with us as we can in that, and that's going to be very difficult. So, and also to Lisa's point of view, I agree, we have to stay civil. But being an honest voice doesn't always mean being a productive voice. And we just, you know, that's just a fact. I mean, you know, people have their views and they state them sometime productively and sometime not so much. So in any case, enough said on that. Let's hear about DemPed and what they're saying. Lisa?
So yesterday I met with Sarosh, and it was a good introductory meeting. Most of my conversations are with Jill's, and Sarosh wanted to meet just kind of on an introductory basis. And we met for about a little over an hour, just a lot of getting to know each other, and then discussing their point of view and their issues where they were. I updated them on where we were, particularly with the survey coming down. They are aware that, so I kind of talked to them about some of the issues that we raised in the letter that we wrote to DemPed on the public engagement. And one of the things I brought up is our RFP process, which is, I know, getting ready to move forward. So Roche, I kind of capped him in on what I've always been talking to Jill's, is, you know, trying to make sure we get the most out of that process. You know, I'm trying to squeeze as much blood from the turnip as I can squeeze. And he understands that, but he is also very honest, as am I. And I think that's what's making me work with the DemPed team, is because I'm just, you know, I'm a straight shooter in my conversation. You know, I wanted him to understand that we, you know, in looking at our RFP process and how it was structured, I had concerns about the level of community engagement, and not, you know, believing that coming to the community with all the rancor that we have about this process, and the support that we have, and then the opposition that we have, that the first meeting that they should have with the community should be that initial our RFP meeting. And for you guys that have been out there doing the research on this, as have I, you know that at that initial meeting is when they further break up the community, and they're talking business, they're talking elements, they're talking what the community preferences are. So that first meeting is a huge deal. And I have like been trying to ring the alarm bell on this as loud as I can. And, you know, with ZDD and the ANC, that first meeting we have to be prepared for, because you know, what I don't want to have happen is, well, a couple things. I know what's going to happen. They're going to have that initial meeting, and then they're going to be told by DMPED that, okay, we're going to roll up your responses, and then we're going to have a subsequent follow-up meeting, and then that's pretty much it. And I know our community is going to have a lot of pushback on that, you know, in terms of not being, you know, feel like they're going to feel like they're not going to have sufficient time. And just looking at the schedule, honestly, those sessions, when they divide the community up into small groups to discuss preferences, the maximum I've seen on any agenda is 20 minutes. That's not sufficient in a good day. So I am telling them that up front, and I have been telling them that you're going to get a lot of issues if you come to the community and try to do that. So, and in saying that, Sarosh is being very honest with me and telling me what the agency directive is, you know, where the mayor kind of stands on the process, and how tweaking the process not only impacts them here in Chevy Chase, but also impacts what they do in the future through other communities. So it was a good conversation. They are willing to further discuss it. We're trying to find ways to, you know, come to a happy medium place. They know I want more engagement sessions, and they seem willing to do that. Jill's is out on vacation this week. So when he comes back, we're going to have more discussion on that. I will tell you that they are working on a timeline, as they always have. The other thing that I mentioned in the survey, so Peter, I gave them the 2 survey objectives that we agreed upon. They really didn't have a lot of, or Sarosh didn't really have, you know, too much input on that. They do want to keep abreast of how the survey goes, and what, you know, the final outcome obviously is going to be, and what it looks like in terms of the questions. And Sarosh was really amenable, which I was so happy, because I was, you know, been very nervous about the survey timeline, to, you know, possibly give us additional time on the process to get that survey in, which was great. They wanted to kick this process off very soon, very soon. And I think you know, we're going to probably have agreement that the RFP, they will still kick off the process, but the RFP may be pushed back till October. That's the latest I think that they are willing to go. But that's great. So I think we got like some good initial wins, you know, a little pushback on the RFP to help accommodate us on the goals that we're trying to have on the survey. And when I talked to him about the survey again, I was very honest with him and told him some of the feedback that we had gotten in the community about, you know, not being heard. Some of the things that this current commission wants to do to correct that in terms of the survey, and how we came up with the 2 objectives. So he understands where we are with that, and why we are doing this process. And then we are also going to discuss, you know, just hopefully flush out more detail, that overall timeline. But what they're also looking is what we're potentially thinking about doing, and I haven't even drafted the email for the ANC, is possibly an initial discussion, Peter, at our June 24th ANC meeting about what our RFP is.
July 24th.
Yeah, July. Yeah, is it the 24th? I don't want to put the wrong.
It's the 10th and the 24th of the.
Okay, good. The 24th of July, right. To just kind of have a really preliminary conversation, because I do think after having OP, there is so much misinformation on the listserv. I don't know what we can do to correct that. But the more I think, maybe DMPED makes it clear what their process does versus what zoning does, maybe that will clarify it for some folks. I think the people that want the information, and we do have people, we had a commissioner that sent me and Peter an email today that said, here's 2 or 3 people in my SMD, and they just want to sit down and talk because they've, seen what's going on a listserv and they're confused and they just want the truth. So there are people out there that are paying attention and listening and do just kind of want, to hear the information. So I think having a separate meeting where they talk about that is going to be, pretty important.
Can I ask a question? Does the fact that they're talking about meeting with us at our July meeting about our RFP means that this important large meeting is pushed off until September?
Yeah, they're not going to do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
They know we're in August and we were trying to get something in prior to break under the auspice of the ANC. And, so that they could start their process after we come back from break. So they're very amenable to that and willing to do that for us.
Good news. That's good news right there.
Very good news. Very good news.
It seemed to me that they were pushing it into August, and that is just so
yeah, they were, it's important for us to, I know that there's a lot of strong sentiment about this, but you all know me, I come from a government background, and probably I'm fairly pragmatic and realistic when it comes to issues like that. And I mean, the government has its timeline. That's just it. I mean, they have their timeline and we're doing the best to try to extend it, but they're going to meet their deadline. I can tell you that. They're going to meet their deadline.
Do other committee members have questions of Lisa or want to talk about what we perhaps should recommend to the ANC that it seek as at least as a standard, a minimum for the RRFP process? Not that we get it necessarily, but yeah, I'm sorry. I've got.
I wanted to interject. Did you see your email from Peter Lynch that he's been trying to join the Zoom?
I did. Yes, I did see it. Peter says he's out of the country and can't get in. I'm working on this, but I'm not sure I have the technical ability to get him in. So, okay, Jamie.
Yeah, Lisa, what you're saying sounds fantastic. I mean, it really sounds to me like a couple of months of work was done sort of in the space of 2 hours. Our concern earlier on was marrying up these schedules, sort of process issues and process questions, and now it seems like we have a clear sense, that is as clear as we can at the moment, of what the steps in that process might be. But most importantly is negotiating the number of meetings and the collateral that is going to appear in those meetings and who is going to present that collateral and how they're going to present it. Because
that's it.
Those things, that is the whole ball of wax right there. And I appreciate all the back and forth and a lot of words, blizzards of words that have gone back and forth about all of this. But it boils down to communicating to the community in these steps. I do agree that when we get, I think introducing the RFP process is an excellent idea. I think in the introduction to the RFP process, you could consider introducing the fundamental zoning issues just by way of introducing the kind of drawings that the community is going to see and all that. So introducing the process, but maybe there's also some content in there. And then I do agree that if it's 2 or 3 sessions, 20 minutes is not long enough. They should probably be you know, typically these are 2-hour sessions, at least the ones that I've been involved in envisioning, and actually longer than that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, you can break groups up into individual groups. The critical thing is for them to come back together and do a wrap at the end of the session. So that there is a report out from all of the individual groups, and there's an organized, curated report out. And typically when we do this in the field, we might get everybody's input before lunch, and then over lunch, the team puts together kind of, and then represents the material to the group again, and gets a broad discussion amongst all the groups. So anyway, I don't want to get too wonky about the process, but it sounds like we have the ability to make some suggestions about the element of the process. And I think the more specific we can be about that, the better. And so I think the work maybe of this committee is to come up with, okay, what are the specific recommendations that we would have relative to the different steps in the process, the real boots on the ground stuff. What kind of drawings, when do you introduce them, you know, who presents them, how long do they take to sort of present the concepts? Because somebody has to present the drawings, because the layperson may or may not be used to looking at these types of drawings. So there has to be some context for that.
But Jamie, you're talking about how that workshop with them goes.
You're right. I'm talking about the whole process, though. I'm acknowledging that there's going to be an introduction of the process in the RRFP. I think that's an excellent idea. And then there are going to be hopefully 2 workshop sessions that are, you know, multi-hour workshop sessions.
I'm just saying, they've done this 6 times. And we really need to hear from them, because I'm sure they have a very definitive idea of how they want to do it, which is not to say it's the best idea, but they're going to know how they want to do it. I mean, I don't know why we can't meet next week with a staff person to have them walk through with you, with Lisa, with whoever, to say, this is what that workshop looks like. And we can say, well, you know, why don't you add this element or that element to it and try and make it better?
Yeah, I agree. And just I'll say this and then I'll shut up. I agree that a discussion about the exact pieces, the timing and all that, you know, that I don't think that's a difficult thing to do, but I actually think they should be listening to us, right? We understand their process. You know, I did the Crummell analysis. They've been through this.
It's all the same.
Yeah, the makings of the process, I think the bones are pretty good.
Yeah.
Right, but
Agree.
we need to be able to make some specific recommendations, knowing what we know about the community, to make this information more accessible, and to make it accessible and to make the process accessible. So that's what I'd like to say. But what I'm hearing right now is a lot of really good, you know, real stuff, and I'm really glad to hear it. So there we go.
Well, let me say 2 things. One, to Ron's point, I hope if we meet with staff, we don't do it next week. I'm going to be involved.
No, we
Well,
won't.
I mean, you know what I'm saying.
I know. And then, and to Jamie's point, I look, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think we're going to need more than 1 or 2 meetings. And I think that wrap-up session is going to need to be one that doesn't just collate the product of the breakup, the various groups, but let's residents talk to each other. I continue to think that there's an immense amount of either yelling at the ANC or yelling at city officials, and there's not enough talk about realistic, what do we face, you know, how are we going to influence it, a realistic conversation among neighbors.
Sure. So let me just anecdotally mention one thing. When you know, I'm a design educator, okay, The first thing we talk about when people present design is it's never I, okay? We talk about removing the person from the concept, so that the concepts are the things that exist independent of individuals. And I think that when I was talking about the wrap session, that is intra-session. So in the workshop, you break it down into smaller groups because people are more comfortable dealing with each other and talking in smaller groups. You know, then there is a kind of organizing on the part of the team of that information. Then you come back together and you have a report out, if you will. I think you could design into the process a kind of a segment in which people, having seen this material, then have an opportunity to you know, in a prescribed time to comment on the range of concepts, not that they're solutions, but the range of things that have been discussed and understood and talked about in the meeting, such that you know, the process can address things that may not have been talked about in the meeting. So anyway, I'm saying I think you probably can design in a call and response or a dialogue session that is specifically set aside for that.
Do others have comments? Hello, come on.
Did we, is it something we said? Did the party go away?
Yeah, you can't
Well,
smell us over Zoom.
did we
so-
kill the party? Sorry.
Well, let me jump in with another thing though. And as far as the ZDD is concerned, I think, Jamie, that everything you said is wonderful. You know this process stuff a lot better than probably anybody else on this Zoom. And if we can move DemPed to incorporate some of those ideas, that's fabulous. At the same time, you know, I'm looking at the plan here. There are not that many elements here. You know, there is what goes in the buildings. Where are the buildings on the site? What about what do we need in open space on the site? What do the buildings look like? I'm not sure there's a lot more to what we would say to DemPed. So I'm wondering if we can't figure out how to do some work on those on this before going into meetings with DemPed, so that we can start to have a discussion among ourselves and perhaps with community members in a room, and you know, take the risk that everybody ends up yelling at each other, but try and move through these and get some input.
Could I briefly respond? I do see hands up. Sorry, could I just briefly? So, right. So I think this should be a collateral-based conversation with DemPed. What kind of drawings? What you know? When do you introduce the results of surveys and things like that? But very much focused on the collateral that you would present as the basis for discussion in these meetings. So.
Susan.
Muted.
Susan?
Sorry, okay.
Yep.
I have a clarification question for Lisa, for Commissioner, our chair, about her conversation with Sarosh. And that is, if he's moving the RRFP process to September, is that correct?
Yes. So the RFP, they want to get it out in October, and they're not going to start the official first meeting, that initial meeting, until after we come back off a break in August. So September will probably be the.
Okay, how did he describe the way that the results of the RRFP process would influence the RFP itself.
We didn't get into that conversation. This is like just very initial, just trying to initially get to the scheduling. We're going to be meeting next week as a follow-up with Jill's. So I could have additional conversation with him about that, this, and other stuff.
I just want to say that to have just a few weeks between the RRFP process and the issuance of the RFP itself is probably very inadequate.
Totally.
There won't be enough time to put in any results from a single report that comes out of, even if it's 2 community meetings, that will influence what developers respond to. And that RFP is the guideline for what developers will propose.
Yeah.
And I don't see that the time adds up.
How long do you think they need to do that?
I would say
From the
at
last
least,
meeting.
I would say it has to be at least 2.5 months.
I don't think I don't know
I
if it's
disagree.
ever been that long. I don't know. I have to go back and check because I've been doing a spreadsheet for all of them with their dates for just that purpose.
Would we expect them to come back to us with a draft of that and us respond before the RFP was issued, or once they have that second meeting, that's the last we hear of them until the RFP is issued?
You know, I don't remember. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
I
You know,
think
'cause it's-
5-week
That's a-
time frame for collating the responses if they come out of the meetings in you know in good shape. I don't see that as being excessive.
Yeah.
But
Let me
I know,
let,
sorry, Randy.
Andy, speak, and then I'd like to make a comment.
I want to follow up on what Ron said, and I think it fits in with what Jamie's been saying as well. This is our real opportunity, I think, and we should not view it as a confrontation with DemPed, but as an opportunity with DemPed. And to paraphrase Hamilton, we shouldn't throw away our shot. We should take full advantage of this. I think we should be prepared. The ZDD can help put this together, but we should be prepared at that first meeting to have, we know the elements, as Ron mentioned, that need to be in the RFP. We should come in with our ask, essentially, and saying, you know, we know, for instance, we know we need open space. How much open space do we want to have? We should tell them, no uncertain terms. We should tell them what we think the library and the community center should include. We should tell them what we think the housing element should be in detail, in as much detail as possible. And as I've said previously, the agency's spoken on a lot of these issues already, many times over the last 4 or 5 years. I would be glad to put together what the ANC has already said on the elements that would go into the RFP. We went through this entire process for the community center, remember, back in 2019. And we had a very detailed report then that specified all of the elements that needed to go into the community center. Not much has changed since then. We still want a first-class community center. And I think we can define that pretty precisely. And we ought to use that information that we've gotten in the past. That was, by the way, based on a very extensive community survey of what they wanted in the community center. So we can do that. And I think we could even have something by the 24th, July 24th, to at least begin looking at as the kinds of things that we think ought to be in the RFP. We should take full advantage of this opportunity.
Could I respond? I think we can certainly say things about what we want in the community center. I suspect we could say things about what we want in the library. Is there a we who we can speak for, a community we, about what we're going to say about the structure of the building, the size of the building? I mean, we may have real community agreement on the issue of open space, but on these other issues, we can all have our opinions. Maybe the ZDD can come to, well, I doubt it,
Well,
come to an agreement on these meta issues. But I mean, I think to say that we've had this conversation is not to recognize the depth of disagreement in the community.
Well, I think there was great agreement in the past about the community center, for instance. And the things that we had in the community center then were a half-court basketball court, an auditorium, senior center, a place for young people to congregate. We had all of those things in there. That's going to define, not by square feet, but it's going to define what needs to be included in a community center. We can do something similar, I think, with the library. Then that defines how much of this space, this total space here, we're going to need for the community center and library. It may be about what we've got right now, slightly larger, I don't know. But then you know what the community center and the library are going to be. If we want a first-class community center and library, then you can start saying, okay, given the height limitations that we want to impose and the lot coverage that we want to impose, the setbacks, all of that, how much space would be left for other uses? And we can do that, I think, and we could reach an agreement on it, I think, actually. And I think we can define what kind of housing we want too. That's something we could do. I think there's agreement, I think pretty widespread, that we want affordable housing, workforce housing, and we don't want a lot, at least, of market rate housing. And we need to talk about that. We need to define that. We need to say this is what we want.
And I think
Demhead's not going to know. Demhead's not going to know what we want until we tell them.
Wait a second. Susan, do you still have your hand up, or is that an
No,
order?
I do. My concern here is that these RFPs have a lot of boilerplate information in them. And there isn't, in my experience of responding to a number of RFPs and winning some, there isn't a lot of interest on the part of DemPed or whoever's issuing the RFP to deviate from allowing the development teams to come up with these basic ideas. And my concern is if the community is very specific, and I applaud everything Randy's saying here, if the community is very specific, I'm wondering what DemPed's interest is in actually baking that into the RFP. I don't see that much of a mechanism for them to do anything except take the results of the RRFP process and make that as an addendum to the RFP, so that developers at least know what that is. But they, developers could go in for their own zoning changes. DemPed is very aggressive in trying to get developers to be very creative. So I don't see a lot of prescription here necessarily resulting in the RFP itself.
So is that a comment about is what you were saying that the process is not going to let us influence, that our RFP process is not going to let us influence the RFP, or that we should or that we should just do something like what Randy is suggesting and really have a wish list in hopes that it gets appended.
I agree with Randy that the work that's been done so far should be collected so that developers know this is a long-term effort on the part of this community, that they will likely have opposition. You know, most development teams really don't want to have a lot of opposition to what they're doing. So it's more of defense than offense here, because you want to defend what you've done so far and be specific about what you want, but make it succinct enough so that it actually gets into something that developers will have to read, because it makes some sense to them. And they can then respond to what DEMPED wants, really, for developers themselves to be very, very creative with this.
Lisa.
I think that was the whole plan of the ANC. I mean, the one thing I'm very cautious about, and I'll just say this, is putting something out there like that. I mean, we have to have, our recommendation has to be, you know, in not necessarily lockstep, but we can't be so far left that DEMPED just throws it out the window. It has to be something. And that's something, you know, Jill's has mentioned, Sarosh has mentioned. I'm very aware of that. It has to be something that aligns with their process. They're only so, if you go through, which I've charted, there are only a handful of elements from all of those RFPs across the city. You know, housing, space, one of them, you know, is very specific to a particular amount of housing and the type of housing, but we're not talking about 10, 15, 20 elements here. We're talking about 5 to 6 across the city. But my concern is with when the ANC and even ZDD brings that to the community. I personally would not want to bring that to DEMPED without hearing these community sessions. That doesn't take a lot of work to roll everything up we've done in the past, but we are being hammered because the community thinks that we have this all predetermined. And if we really want to try to reestablish our trust with the community, even if we have a predetermination of what we want, what we like, what we would like to see. I love housing. I'm not afraid of height. I've said this 1,000 times, but I do want people to understand that I'm listening to them and I'm trying to hear their concerns. And if we put a product out that specifies that to DEMPED ahead of this process, I think we're going to catch holy hell.
Yeah, which it just tells us, I mean, Lisa's statement there captures exactly how much we're squeezed by both sides, because we can't stray too far from where the DEMPED is, but we can't stray too far from where the community is, or where the document is going to be dead letter when it gets to DEMPED. Randy, let's just do Jim Feldman first. Jim.
Yeah, am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
You're unmuted.
Yeah, okay. I just briefly, I don't really understand this conversation, because I had thought that what they're trying to do with the RFP hearings is to hear what the community wants.
Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
so I don't think going in initially with saying this is what we want, and it sounds like it's trying to short circuit the process. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to know what the ANC has already recommended or agreed to, or those kinds of things, but it does seem a little bit off from what this process is supposed to be.
Randy.
Yeah, I'm going by, in part, the RFP process that we went through in 2019 with the community center. We went all the way through the RFP process and a selection of a contractor, and the contractor began the work. In that instance, the ANC's report on the community center was appended to the RFP, as Susan suggested. And they emphasized in the meeting with the prospective bidders that they should consider the ANC's recommendations for what should be included. And that would be part of the evaluation process.
Definitely.
And so I think the end result here, however you want to get there, but the end result should be that there is a recommendation from the ANC based on the community input that says, this is what we want.
Absolutely.
And unless we say that in no uncertain terms, nobody is going to listen to us. I mean, if they just say, well, you put together all of this stuff and we'll figure it out. No, we should tell them what we want.
Yeah.
And I think to do less than that is to leave it more up to them to make the decision rather than for the community to be making the decision.
But I'd say, Randy, that Jim's question is a fair one. And I think, Jim, the answer to the dilemma is that we're concerned that our RFP process is too short and too much up against the draft of the RFP to really be an honest solicitation of community preferences, and that I think what Randy is proposing is effectively to try to have banked a proposal. I mean, again, we can't stray too far from where the community is, or we're going to catch holy hell. But yeah,
we can frame the discussion though for the community. We can say, okay, here's how much we're making a straw proposal. The straw proposal is that we have X amount of open space and it be devoted to these functions. Straw proposal. The community center needs to have a half-court gymnasium. And those are the kinds of things that we ought to be putting out there as at least straw proposals, it seems to me. Otherwise, we're just going to have this very nebulous kind of discussion that's never going to get us to where we want to be.
fair enough. Lisa.
I'll only say I think that, I can't imagine, Randy, the ANC doing anything but that. We've always had actionable recommendations, and I don't want people to think that this commission is not going to do the same. We are absolutely going to do that. My concern is with timing. We are in a process of a survey. We're in a process of additional community engagement. One of the things this ANC, every person on it, regardless of their opinion on housing, the diehard pro-housing to the ones that are the most skeptical, I can't say the word right now. You know what I mean? All have agreed upon that we have got to get our boots on the ground and talk more to our community and get their thoughts on all of this process. We all agree upon that. And so we have to be very cautious and very, aware of when and how we do that. We're not going to miss the deadline. DMPED is going to ask the ANC for input. We're going to give it to them. We're going to be very specific. But that input should include current conversations and current, information that we're hearing from our community members.
Just responding to Lisa, it does sound to me, Lisa, as if we might think about doing our own meeting, community meetings in July. I've just, besides the survey,
Yeah. And I do think we have to, I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves on the timeline. So Roche also made it very clear, it's not set in stone right now. That's what we're going to be discussing next week. So once we have more detail, when Jill get back, because maybe he's the one that's got, a better idea of that timeline, we'll have a better understanding of where all this fits in. And then we could, tweak from there. But I think one of the most critical things is upfront how we want that meeting to look. And like Peter, you said in the beginning, is 2 meetings enough? I don't think 2 meetings enough. I think we have to very, very early on in the process, start talking with them about how we can structure it in a way that fits this community. That's going to be really, I think, one of the most important first things that we do.
Jamie.
And that's going to affect the timeline.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, perhaps I misunderstood Randy, but it seemed like you were saying, well, in that first introductory meeting, we should be telling DEMPED what the community wants, but the purpose of the cycles of community engagement workshops is to reach that point where we have the community recommendations behind us. Now, there's, you know, there has to be a format for developing that consensus in a way that becomes tangible to DEMPED, you know, coming out of the community meeting process. And I think it can be designed into that process such that part of the goal or the mission of the workshop cycles is to come up with community-based recommendations, some community-based consensus on the key elements of the project. But I can't see it coming from anywhere else, really, you know. But there could be scenarios that are introduced in the workshop process that contain certain elements that can focus conversations in certain scenarios. That's a possibility, but I think we can, you know, hopefully design a process that results in tangible outcomes in terms of recommendations. And I agree. I think if you have, an introduction to the process, a meeting with a kind of introducing the process so the community knows what's coming, and then 2 workshop sessions, you know, to me sounds like a pretty good structure. Then, of course, there's the question of exactly how those workshops are structured, and what collateral is used as a basis for the conversation. When I say collateral, I mean graphics, I mean drawings, I mean some verbiage and a presentation of those things to the people that are there.
Okay, Jim, hold on. Jim Feldman, and then let me make a suggestion. I do think we want to have some discussion about OP and the zoning issue. I'm a little lost about what the next steps should be, and I'd be interested in people's views. So, but let's see if I can suggest
I just wanted to just have one slight caution, which is you can't have too many meetings. And if you want people to actually participate and you tell them you got to come to 6 different meetings, they're not going to come. So I just wanted to, we got to be conscious of the fact you can't ask people to do too much, as well as you don't want to have too little either, for sure.
Yeah.
I would second that. I mean, keep in mind, this is one block. Okay, and to have 2 major community meetings to talk about what to do on one block seems fine. I mean, you know, like Peter, you objected to you know, us talking about, you know, we're never going to find be able to come to some agreement about height. You know, maybe we will, maybe we won't, but you know, there's a lot of vitriol out there about 2 floors of height. That's all it's about. And it seems to me that reasonable adults, especially when facilitated by a wonderful architect like Jamie, can sit around a table in a conference room and talk about how to tell DEMPED we would like to talk about height in the RFP. It doesn't mean we come up with an exact number, but maybe there's a way of talking about it that can go into this RFP process.
Yeah, let me just say, it is only one block. It is the lead block, right? As goes the community center, likely goes the rest of the avenue. It will be so it's a very important site, and it's very important because it's this is the center of our community, and so I do think that maybe reasonable adults can do it. Reasonable adults, reasonable and otherwise, are doing a lot of other things in this community right now.
Yeah, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know what that means. There goes the rest of it. If the option is to come out of this and ditch everything, I do not accept that as an option, because but the rest of the block, the rest of the whole thing, NC 18, is an increase in density over what exists now by 1 floor. So what does that mean? There goes the rest of it. The rest of it's going to happen. 1 block. Let's figure out what to do on the 1 block.
So Jim, is that a new hand up or an old hand up? Old hand up, okay. Well, look, what do you think of this idea? I mean, there's been this suggestion, mostly on Randy's part, that we have a lot of the elements of a potential community proposal in place already, or we've already done the. If you, Randy, or if you and Ron, or you and Ron and Jamie or others want to give us an example of that, I mean, to try to start rough that out. I mean, I think the committee would be glad to receive it, and I think the ANC would be glad to receive it. I mean, it's a spec job on your part. I'm sorry, no pun intended. But I mean, I ultimately, I mean, we need community blessing of some sort out of either meetings we have or the RRP process. But I mean, if you want to work on that, that seems fine. Do others?
I'll start on that and include things that the ANC has said in the past. Connect it back to what's been done in the past, so that this is not just my coming up with. I
understand. Yes. I mean, I understand. Lisa, do you have other suggestions in this regard about sort of closing out this piece of the discussion?
I mean, we could do that, but I also think the group does kind of, well, I mean, I don't listen. I mean, you guys got a lot on your plate. I'm telling you what I'm doing next week. I'm meeting with DMPED and we're going to discuss the timeline. And I'm going to see if I can get them to give us additional leeway on the structure of the meeting. If you all have something that you would like me to discuss or me to put forward at that meeting, I will gladly do so.
This is not for that meeting. This is not.
No, I know that. I know that. He asked if I had anything else. So I'm telling you what I have. Okay. I'm doing the meeting next week with DMPED. That's my most urgent need right now.
Yeah, Lisa, I would add, just to make sure.
Just Ron, just wait a sec. What about Susan's concerns about the timeline? Will you raise those about?
That's what I said. I said that.
I just wanted to get some clarity. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and also what Susan was talking about how this whatever is done in our RFP or comes from the ANC gets reported in the RFP, because if you look at the RFPs online, a number of them really don't have any direct direction to follow community involvement. It has this RFP process appended to it,
right,
with language that we really think you should read this stuff. And I don't think there's a huge risk, by the way, from the community's point of view, because anybody who wants to get selected is going to want to make the ANC happy. So they're probably going to read it, and they're probably going to pay attention to as much of it as they can. But let's just make sure we understand how they're going to use what we do.
I think that is how they're going to use it. I don't think there's anything else that I've seen. The only thing I will ask them that question, obviously, but I mean, that's the only thing that I've seen is it's appended in the RFP process.
Okay. Can I just add one other concern that I hope you raise? And I'd like committee members to understand. Gilles has decided thus far since March has not talked to me. So I've written him a letter asking him why, and if I personally offended him, apologizing. But so basically Lisa right now is the go-between. One of the other issues that I'd like to see raised with DMPED is what is the response to this committee's recommendation and the ANC's resolution on the deed restriction. They have run silent, and they've run beyond, I believe, the formal deadline for responding to ANC resolutions.
Yeah, and I definitely think we need to discuss that. And I think they're probably going to give us a standard answer is, that is not that doesn't, I believe, fall under the great weight statute. It's basically us sending them comments and asking for the response. But out of courtesy, they should. We always get a response from Anita Kozart.
Yeah.
Every time she personally responds to us. It would be nice if DMPED would do the same. I agree.
Peter, I'm sorry, but I had one other thing I wanted to ask
ahead.
Suzanne, since we have her here. On the issue of the mix of market rate and affordable, I noticed on the Hebrew Home RFP, it said the community wanted more than the 30% minimum, and they end up getting it.
Yep.
Is there any chance that we could expect DMPED to put anything other than that in an RFP? I mean, would they be willing to say to limit the respondents to people who wanted to do 100% affordable, or would they push back on that?
That's to you, Susan.
Yeah, I know, I'm thinking. They're under tremendous pressure in choosing among these RFPs. And they'll get a lot of them for this site, I think. Some from even out of town, I think. I've even had people at DMPED tell me they think some will come from out of town. If you can, it's one of the mayor's priorities to have as much 30% and below housing as possible. So everything the mayor has said as a priority, they'll try to weave that in. If it's in alignment with what the community also wants, all to the good, then you've got that voice coming, that point coming to developers twice. But I think they're going to be really it's going to be very challenging choosing among the RFPs, given all the things we want to put in this relatively small space. Some things not everybody's going to be happy, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And the other important thing is this won't all take place for another, year and a half to 2 years, but the tax-based situation is restricting the amount of subsidy available to any developers very severely.
Yeah.
So you need a lot of subsidy to serve 30% and below renters, a lot of subsidy. And you've got to be in alignment with the Public Housing Authority because there's a low rent subsidy program. So then they'll get into the act.
I was sort of asking, but of the quantity, not necessarily the depth of affordability, but whether it's a mix of market rate and affordable at 30% affordable, or 40 or 50 or 100%. How we get to make that request if we have a specific request, like 100%.
Well, I think that goes in the concise, specific attachment to the RFP that I have every confidence they would attach. But I would be very surprised if they just take what the community wants and just put that in. I mean, anything's possible, but I would be surprised if they were that specific.
Okay.
Can I suggest that we wrap this part of the conversation? I guess just to be fair to people who are on the chat, Jordan, you could say this yourself, but Jordan Benderly, who's a member of this committee, says, I think the idea of community input is getting lost in this discussion. It's now about what the ANC wants. I guess my response to that is, I think both Lisa and I have said we're vividly aware. we can't go too far away from DMPED, but we cannot go too far away from the community either. And as Lisa has previously said, across the board of the commissioners, and we are a really disparate group.
Yeah.
This issue of the community having a say is an important one. Cal, you have your hand up, but I do want to get on to the zoning. What do you, go ahead and, but
Oh,
let's,
Ron, I disagree with 2 meetings being enough, especially if those times in the smaller groups are very short. I think this needs at least twice as many meetings. And so I don't know, I don't understand why we can't influence the structure of this process.
really, folks, we need to get on to the other thing. Jamie, short?
The 2 meetings should be multi-hour meetings. You can't do this in 20 minutes.
Still not enough.
Okay. Look, we have the sort of other piece of this equation is the zoning, and Monday, OP came to the meeting. Many of you were at it either virtually or in person. There was a lot of reaction. I think they did an honest job of presenting what they've put together, and I think they've done an honest job of trying to do zoning that complies with the comprehensive plan. I think the community a lot of community members are shocked, and I think part of that shock was that we've seen so few pictures of what change on the avenue would look like. We saw so few pictures during the small area planning process that, you know, this is getting to be real for people in a way that it was not either presented or reacted to during the SAP process. Peter Lynch has circulated a rough draft of a resolution that that I think it could be summarized as saying, let's start over. That may be a little unfair, but there is a view that we've just sort of, the OP has missed the mark. I don't think realistically we can just start over, but I'd be interested in views about kind of what you think the ANC should do next with this. I mean, and I think frankly, the OP is wondering that too. I think they've gone back again. I think Joel Lawson is a wonderful guy, and he's really trying. I think Jennifer Steingasser is good too, and I just think they're really trying, but they don't really know what to do now. Do any of you have views?
Peter's still on the phone. I feel like we should give him a fair chance to.
Is he on the phone? Did you get him? Did he get on? I didn't know that he got on.
He didn't get on.
Okay, well, Peter.
I thought so what she's probably talking about, Peter, I put in the chat, I had Peter on my phone.
Oh, yeah.
And so I kept telling who I thought was Peter Lynch to hang on because Jamie was talking, and then when he finally talked, I'm like, this is Peter Gosselin. So Peter Gosselin read the email and thought I was saying for him to call. So we didn't get Peter Lynch, unfortunately.
Sorry. I mean, do you want to speak on his behalf? You saw his rough proposal, right?
You talking to
I feel like he should speak. I mean, it's awkward to debate his proposal when he's not here. That seems not fair.
Yeah, well, look, but I actually think that the real question here is not debate the Lynch proposal or not. The real question is, what should we do next? And what should the commission do next? And what do you think OP should do next? I mean, there clearly was a lot of opposition to NC 18, even downsized. What's the next?
19.
And 19, you mean?
19, I'm sorry, 19, I'm sorry.
Could I make one comment here? Is I at the last meeting, I think, or the one before that, I commented that I thought it was interesting that OP had floated this original draft with the higher NC 19, and that maybe the fact that there was this much of a delay means that they were thinking about it, and they did decrease it. To me, the remaining key issue, I mean, I don't know about the height. And to me, actually, frankly, a floor or two, one way or the other, is not that big a deal, but, sure, I think if people feel like, hey, we should try to get it a little lower, then the ANC ought to recommend it be a little lower. The other issue is lot density. And I don't see why they couldn't. I think the RFP process would likely take care of the density problems, but what the community really needs is an assurance, a commitment from the city that we are actually going to have some open recreation space for all users, just like it says in the small area plan, you know, and a state-of-the-art library and community center, and that those are actually going to happen here and we're committed to it. And one way to do that would be to lower that lot coverage a little bit, because I don't think that 80%, probably you just can't have all the outdoor recreational stuff that you ought to have. I don't know what the right percentage is, but so I guess my only suggestion is to continue to try to work with them and explain that the community would like to see that, and the small area plan itself suggests that you need robust indoor and outdoor recreational and conversation space for all people of all abilities and ages. And why not put a little bit more oomph into that and reassurance to the community by putting it into the zoning?
Well, I 100% agree. I've been the #1 proponent of preserving the open space on this committee, but given what Susan said about the financial pressures, it just doesn't seem, and that, I mean, that's why people are upset and angry.
Having looked at this in a lot of.
Wait 1 second, Lisa, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'll go after Ron.
Having looked at this in a lot of detail, I think that the height is much more vulnerable, if you will, to the pressures of the economics of making this happen than the open space. I think the open space can solve it. Will be able to solve itself. I mentioned this to Peter in an email today. You know, I think the OP's presentation was dismal. As I told him, I would have fired that whole team if I were the director for bad communication skills, both orally and visually. And if they had just rendered the existing zoning the way they rendered the proposed, it wouldn't have changed the reaction in the community. The community would have been up in arms about having those buildings in the community. So you know, it's set back, in my view, this entire discussion deeply, and we need to find a way to talk about what's being proposed in a way that is you know, more accurate. And I'll just close by saying, you know, I'll tell you guys, I'm working you know, behind the scenes a little bit to change this lot coverage, arguing with the people I know in OP about how to frame this open space requirement so that it works to give us the same open space we have now, and perhaps with some provision that would allow it to be reduced a little bit if it met the community's approval. And I'm actually fairly optimistic that we'll get there.
Lisa.
So just to piggyback off that, I think the ANC needs to work with OP on lot coverage. I think that's our big next step. I know some people are not going to be satisfied with any height other than maybe 3 or 4 stories, but I mean, realistically, with what we need to do, that's just not realistic. So I am not too far off from where I'm liking the height, but I think that based off of what Joel said, based off of some things that Ron has been doing, we have a real shot, I think, at the lot coverage issue. And I think that's where we need to focus quickly.
Libby. No,
Hi, just wanted to chime in with what Ron just said. I mean, from a layman's standpoint, the DEMPID presentation was
OP.
The OP presentation.
Yeah, OP. It's just arcane vocabulary that they continue to use, and either people walk away frustrated or they feel that language is being used to mask things that they are not supposed to grasp. But really, if you all could meet with OP about the importance of putting themselves in the place of the audience. They have a way of obviously going and speaking their knowledge, but they've got to talk to people who are not familiar with these terms.
Yeah.
And you will have, I think, much more appreciation and a greater success rate if they can do that. I mean, I think it should be kind of basic communication skills for this type of thing if you're going to talk to residents.
Yeah. Well, we did, just to piggyback off that, we had several meetings with them ahead of the meeting. And I think it's like, you know, I don't know how to use this example because I don't want to be offensive, but you know, like some people are just technocrats, you know, where they speak in technical language, or if you're in the government, everything is an acronym. And I think sometimes it's not always as easy, maybe as we think it is, to translate that into like layman's terms where everybody like kind of understands it. But going into it, I think they got it because I think they heard from me and Peter in what we needed them to display to the community. I just think they struggled to do that. And I do think, I think they got flustered. I think there was a lot of fluster there. This was not walking into a community where people just sat down and listened to what they heard. There was quite a few interruptions, and we have to do better control of that in a community, because if you get your presenters flustered, where they're afraid to say what they need to say, then you shot yourself in the foot. So it does no good. So I think we have to work on it from both ends. But I agree with you, Liddy. I mean, I think everybody kind of felt the same way.
Okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, so I just wanted to mirror what Randy was saying. A lot of work has been done in the past about community priorities, and we have a good idea of what they are. And a lot of that made it into the small area plan. And one of the things I think when we, or whomever it is, ANC or Lisa goes back to DEMPED and OP, is to, Erkin Osberg wrote the small area plan. And the small area plan talks about preserving and maximizing open space. We know what we have there. We have two buildings. They're like 35% lot coverage, and they're 2-floor buildings. It's almost like saying to the OP, look, these were your words. Like, why should we be arguing about lot coverage? And on the height, the only technical thing, and I don't know the answer to this, and maybe Jamie does, is a gradient south to north and east to west, right? So as I understand it, they sort of measure from the lowest point, not the highest point. So if we're going to have the same level of floors of public space that we have now, and there's going to be a maximum of 80 feet, and you have to take into account that gradient, I'm not sure how that works. And some people have been saying, oh, well, it's going to have to be underground in some respect. And again, that would be really hard to sell to the community and inconsistent with everything that was in the small area plan, which is open space, light, beautiful space for the community together.
Two things, Jonathan. One, the way the zoning works is that the architect can choose where the front of the building is, and they can choose the higher side rather than the lower side, which obviously has an impact through the building, but it really depends on the details of the design of the project, what that means. The other thing is, let me add on to the lot coverage thing. One of the things that Joel said at the meeting that I had never heard before was that part of the reason they maintained the 80% lot coverage was because the library wanted to be on one floor. So therefore they needed more lot coverage to accommodate that. So I contacted this very cooperative and a woman at DC Public Library who took us on the tour of West End some a million years ago at this point. And I asked her, is that true? Because it seemed odd, because they have so many nice multi-level libraries just, within a mile of us. And she said, that's ridiculous. No, they would never insist on one story if it meant taking away accessible outdoor space. So that's the hook that I'm using to go back to OP and ask what the deal is. If we get back that library floor that can now be stacked and turn that into open space, what do those numbers look like? So that's sort of how I'm playing it.
Can I ask a question and make a suggestion, sort of picking up on what Jonathan said? When we talk about, if you did a comparison of the height of, for example, the community center now versus the maximum possible height under this new revised NC 19, typically, do they measure from the bottom of the building to the top of the building? I assume yes. And if they do, don't we have in effect an extra floor in the pedestal of land that the building now sits on? I mean, shouldn't the appropriate measure be what's the height of the community center now from the sidewalk to the top of the building versus what's the height of 80 feet from the sidewalk to the top of a revised NC envelope? Does that question make sense?
Unfortunately, sense and zoning don't always go together. You know, the way zoning works is you can measure from the front of your building, the lot line at the front of the middle of the front of your building, wherever that is designated. And that's how you measure. So in this case, it is possible that I don't know exactly what the gradient is, but it's possible that, you know, the first floor at McKinley may be able to have some good height on it because the building, overall building height is measured from Northampton.
Well, okay. All right. I don't want to get into the details here. It does to me that it's reasonable to ask OP if there's a way to present this at least, and maybe to put a requirement in revised NC 19 that has that says that we'll consider measurement from the middle of the front of the building, and we look at the current building and NC 19.
I would just, Peter, I'd just say there is there's probably like 20 volumes of zoning cases over how this is measured that they would fall back on. And,
I'm vividly aware of this because I was involved in 5333, which they measured 20 feet behind the building on Kanawha. Listen, it is 6:26. I've got another meeting. Are there any final comments by people that you want to be sure are made before we end?
We should give Peter Lynch a chance to talk about his proposal at some point.
Yeah,
meeting when he's here.
Yeah, when he's here. Yeah, I had understood he was going to be here, but that's why I suggested that as the centerpiece for this discussion. But okay. So with that, I'd like to adjourn. Could we shut off the video? And folks, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Next week, same time.
Next week. Yeah, next week.
Wait a minute, this is